Hey, everybody, and welcome to Fire Engineering's Humpday Hangout, to our show, Issues and Challenges in Today's Fire Service. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, along with my good friend and buddy and Humpday Hangout co-host, Assistant Chief Terry McGrath. Terry's with Lewisville, FD, in Texas, and we've got another great show lined up for you today. As a reminder, if you have any questions, jump on Twitter and send them our way. Just make sure you add, we ask this each show, that you add hashtag FE Talk for fire engineering, hashtag FE Talk, and we'll do our best to get into as many of them as we can. Today, Terry and I are hanging with another couple of just great fire service leaders, two great guys. Rich Collins. Rich is the Emergency Services Director for Sarasota County, Florida. I said it earlier before we went live. I can't remember not knowing Rich. We go back a long way, and we'll talk about that. And Lee Newsome. Lee's he's retired battalion chief of training for the city of Ocala Fire Rescue in Florida. And welcome, Rich and Lee.
Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, and Lee, we wanted to jump in there with you first. If you could give our viewers, always try to do this little background, how you got into fire service, and then where you're at now with things, and we'll run from there.
Wow, you want me to go back that far? All right. So started in the Fire Explorer program with the County Fire Service, and then went into the fire service right as I turned 18 years old. Had the opportunity to join the County Fire Service and get my EMT paramedic or EMT firefighter. Moved on and got my paramedic, and was blessed with a public safety career of 20 years. Firefighter, paramedic, worked my way up to battalion chief with the city of Ocala, covering training. The last 6 years with the fire service, I found something new. Was asked to, or forced to be the emergency management coordinator for the city under the deputy city manager, and found a new love besides the fire service. So after leaving the fire service, went to work 2 years with the Florida Division of Emergency Management as an area coordinator, covering 8 central Florida counties, and started a business, Emergency Response Educators and Consultants in Ocala, Florida, and serve as a training and exercise manager for that now. Oh,
very cool. I like how you say forced. My buddy Rocco Forte was the chief of Minneapolis for years, and when he retired, the mayor asked him as a favor to take over OEM for him. And if you guys remember the infamous bridge collapse in Minneapolis, right after he got in there and straightened everything out and did a great job with a great team, and one of the best run disasters for that type of incident anywhere. And it all came down to, their disaster preparedness and, I mean, everything planning ahead of time. If you're talking about, when we do the exercises, right? People go, yeah, Lee, like that's really going to happen. And then you look at Minneapolis and go, okay, let's take a bridge in the middle of like rush hour that collapses with cars on top of it. It collapses into a river, which is like their main for all the barges, and it also collapses on the rail lines, which collapses on the road below that. And it's the only sort. You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, see, that stuff does happen. That's why we prepare. Because they had a great plan, especially with debris management, they were able to really do a good job with it. Nothing on the, as big and huge as it was, nothing on a scale of long range when it comes to hurricanes, but awesome. Hey, Rich, a little background on yourself, buddy.
Sure, Rick. A long time ago, back in the late 80s, joined the Air Force Reserve, was a flight medic there in the reserves. And when I came out, I'm from Chicago, Southside Irish. Most of my family is either law or fire. I chose the winning fire group. And I joined the fire service. Darien Woodridge was there for 16 years. In 2004, accepted a position with Osceola County as a deputy chief for training administration. Got hired the first week we were sending teams to Katrina. And then about a month after that, Hurricane Wilma came up the state, and had several spin-ups, got involved with emergency management there, working in the EOC. And then 2014, joined Sarasota County as Emergency Services Director, which work with the fire department, emergency management, our lifeguards who have the best office in the county, and our 800 megahertz radio system and 911 tech support.
Well, and you work in a place, obviously, I think the #1 rated beach in the country, North America, let alone the world. It's just incredible. I spent 2 spring trainings there when the White Sox used to be there, which was pretty awesome. So I'm very partial to that. And yesterday, happy birthday to the Air Force. It was yesterday, right?
That's right.
So happy birthday to our great Air Force. For our viewers, and Terry, you and I have talked about this. Rich and I go way back. Rich and I had the opportunity to serve as the chief of training and the assistant chief in Darien Woodridge. I met Rich, and Rich, that was when Rich was a firefighter, got promoted lieutenant, then obviously assistant chief, and kept moving up the ranks all the way up to chief down in Florida. But one of the stories I like to tell is we had and recently we just saw what happened in Mass with the gas explosions, and we had a singular event, not as nothing on the scale what they had over there, but what about 11:30 at night, Rich? 11:15, 11:30 at night. Day after Thanksgiving, family was smelling gas for a couple days in his house, and about 11:15, 11:30, blew the house up. I think there was 3 occupants, right? Son and daughter-in-law, whatever, and the mom. We ended up, I think it knocked Rich out of bed. It was a couple blocks from his firehouse where he was a lieutenant. And I will say this, and Rich, I know it embarrasses you a little bit, but you were incredible. You were the first arriving officer. I think in total, when we were done, we had 41 houses damaged. We had the one totally destroyed with fire, with gas. I think we had one fatality or
one fatality.
One fatality. We had one of our off-duty guys grab a woman and on video, drag her out, slid 2 houses off their foundations, wrecked a bunch of, and for our viewers, typical, just how you see him now, calm and cool. Rich pulls up and he says, Darien Woodridge, just 621. I'm out. I've got a single family. Oh, it's all gone. It's all gone. He goes, go ahead, give me a box on this. Set stage for the box at 63rd Pershing at the Target shop parking lot. And then he said, we're pulling the deck gun, which I know what you meant. You were going to work with the deck gun. But, Rich, you did, I'm just going to say, you did with everything. There was insulation and stuff just still falling from the sky and in the trees when you got there. You did an incredible job, buddy, that day. I'll never forget that. I got in there pretty quick. You did an awesome job. First arriving officer, rescues, gas, fire, all those homes, everything else, debris all over the street. And my hat's off to you, buddy. You did a great job.
It was a great team, great department, great guys to work with. It was an awesome time.
Our buddy Wayne Messenger was BC in it, and
another calm and cool as a cucumber on the radio.
Yes, and then you add Curtis Burt to that. Curtis was one of your firefighters, so now chief in Lake City. So Curtis Burt was at that call as well. But hey, for our viewers, Terry and I have been wanting to do one on the whole hurricane response. Preparedness, getting everything all lined out for that. For those, whether you're somewhere along the Gulf Coast, West Coast, whatever, wherever there's water, for the most part, and big water. And last week when we saw what was approaching our friends on the East Coast, we weren't sure. First, it was south. Like it always is. Is it going to hit here, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina? We've got a lot of good friends that are dealing with the aftermath of that now, still with a lot of challenges and problems. And we didn't want to bother them. And Terry and I talked about it. I said, man, why don't we call Rich and get Rich with a couple of his buddies on, and let's just talk. Let's talk our way through, because they're doing an incredible job on the East Coast. Hats off to the folks out there. We got so many great friends, and they're doing us all proud. And plus, everybody that's responded from across the country, if you will, to assist with that, which rarely happened before 9/11 and before Katrina. We could talk about that as well. So we just came up with the program title, Managing a Hurricane Response from Those Who Have Been There. We know the state of Florida. Rich and Lee, I was telling Rich the other day, when it comes to hurricane response and preparation, to Florida is like California to wildland. They've got it down. Our friends in California do an incredible job with their wildland response. And in Florida, I guess practice makes perfect, but oh my goodness, from past experiences there and everything else, you guys are awesome at taking care. So I guess that's what we want to do for our viewers. Let's walk through this, and Terry and I'll throw it to you two guys and jump in there. But let's get to the preparedness part of it. Nothing coming, nothing on the radar. The work that goes into, and Lee, you do a lot of this now with your business, not your retired working full time with your business, running exercises. Walk us through the whole the work, the effort that goes into preparing for when all of a sudden they tell you, looks like we got one foreman out in the Atlantic or down the Caribbean?
Well, here in Florida, biggest thing that we see that is so important to us is the opportunity for the multidiscipline planning. And it all starts with the planning process and getting all the partners there together so that they're working together as a team. So we really can't say enough about that ability to do community preparedness planning together. So many times we see years ago, people that would plan in a silo and not engage their community partners. So it was very important to really embrace that concept. And I think since 9/11 and NIMS, National Incident Management System, and the days where we used to train individually, and I call it cross-pollinating today, but NIMS really brought us around to training cohesively together as a whole community. And that has been so important to today's response, is that we train together as a team.
And Lee, you mentioned that it was perfect, the phrase, the description of the silo, training the silo, where, I'm a big one on think big. I've said that for years. Rich, you and I used to say, when see in Sector 3, when it was Sector 3, and then it was like think 2.5. And then when you get to be a chief, you're like, just think big. Just think big, and it's, you can turn them around, but think big. And real quick, Rich, before we jump to you, Terry, we've come so far in Texas, prior to TIFMAS and all the things you're doing there with the hurricane response. When it came to the lessons learned, Terry, remember us sitting there during Katrina? We have 50-something divers, all this equipment. We couldn't go anywhere because of the red tape, and yet people sitting on their roofs because of that hurricane. Terry, I know you were pissed off about it, just like I was. We got all these resources, we can't go anywhere. Lee and Rich, I'm going to ask Terry. Terry, you guys have come a huge way from where it was way back when. I know when I was there too as well, when it comes to hurricane response or disaster preparedness in Texas.
Yeah, and it's funny, Chief, because I think that the system that we have now, and on one of my questions I wanted to pose later in the show, but I'll give Rich and Lee a head up and they can be thinking about it. But it's where did we, how far we've come from where this started, where you were mentioning, Lee, about working in silos, which, I think we're all fortunate that we've been in this business long enough that we actually got to see this thing come full circle from individual isolated agencies kind of handling their area of the world to now there's a lot of cooperation going on. But we've come a long way. But my question I pose to you later in the show will be where do we need to be? What else needs to be fixed, shored up, and how do we make it better? But getting back to Chief Lasky's point, in Texas, this all came about because of the TIFMAS, which was born because of wildfire problems. And the raging wildfires that would take place in communities that were not equipped to handle it, and so because that formed up so quickly, and I think a couple of things happened were that the state coordinating the resources, but then each individual agency, and I can certainly speak for Lewisville, there was never any hesitation on anyone's part to say we would not get involved in this. Now, the young, there's the certain part of the firefighter that wants to be involved because it's action and they want to go to the action. So you never have a shortage of people that are willing to jump in there and in this case, get their feet wet, literally speaking. But, through the TIFMAS and as that program evolved and really got to the point that it operated at a really high level and was the organization of the resources, the mobilization of the resources, everything took place fairly quickly. And we've gotten to a point where it's kind of runs like clockwork, but now we transition that into an all hazards environment to where we can send resources in, whether that's to simply backfill locations, allow local responders time to catch their breath or address their situation with their living houses and family and all those sort of things, or going down there to lend specific resources, whether that be swift water or dive or lending boat operations or whatever the case may be. But we, in Texas, or certainly where we're located in Texas, being in the central or northern part of Texas, we get involved a lot now with sending resources to ground zero versus what you guys deal with, which is being at ground zero. So it's a little bit different mindset and a little bit different operationally planning for us. Much easier for us to do it than you guys of having to knowing something's coming, put a plan in action, and then executing the plan all the while the roof's coming in on you and you've got your own fan. It's been a wonderful thing to watch because unfortunately, I think sometimes in government, we take our turn at the plate, but if we're batting 300, we're probably doing really good when it comes to government functions. But I think when it comes to this, we're hitting 1,000. I think as far as being able to go out there and really execute and provide a lot of resources to those who desperately need it.
Well, and that's Terry, like you said, that's due to the determination of people who were frustrated, with the lack of a good response prior to that, and it's taken a lot of work. Rich, you came from the South Side of Chicago, like I did, and when I got out to Coeur d'Alene first, the wildland interface out there where they're jumping out of perfectly good plains and the middle of forest and all the stuff up in the Rockies was incredible. Then I get down to Texas. I can't imagine for you and Lee. You've got this state that most of the hurricanes seem to just go either right up through it. I know we're going to talk maybe about Irma here in a little bit, hopefully, but it's like you can't just say, well, part of the state. I mean, you can't. I mean, it's amazing how those things will just run from one coast to the other. Just back and forth, or about the time it goes in, it comes. I mean, it had to be a huge undertaking, for you just as a chief, as a deputy and a chief, to get down there and insert yourself into that. Lee's been there, he's been doing it a long time. You know what I'm saying? The awakening to see that operation, how has it grown since you got there in the way of response?
There's Florida has an excellent program through the Florida Department of Emergency Management, the Florida Fire Chiefs, the Florida Department Law Enforcement, working together. One of the things that every county has and every city has is a comprehensive emergency management plan. And that really is the basis or the foundation for, what are your hazards and what are the potentials, and then what threats, and then what are you training on. And when I got here when Katrina hit, we, as the state, helped over in Mississippi and had multiple teams going over. The Florida Fire Chiefs, through the State Emergency Response Plan, or SERP, worked with our teams to get them over there. We had great coordination and communication. So it was almost like walking right into a MABUS type concept from Illinois and Wisconsin. Excellent communication and assistance across the state. And it really is invaluable when you're talking about whether it's a hurricane, which is obviously one of our primary threats, but Florida has a huge wildfire issue as well. Back in 98 and 03, 05, 06, when I got here, we were sending teams all over the state for wildland. So it really all begins there. And I would say, whether you're in Florida or wherever you're at in the country, what are those threats that are out there? As you say, think big, and then start, okay, what would we need to do if that's coming at us? And then, conversely, in Florida, as you mentioned just a minute ago, we had Irma come up the center of the state, while Andrew came through in 92 and came through the south of the state. And, Charlie came through in 04 and did a beeline of Cat 4 storm winds across the entire state from just south of us all the way through Central Florida and Jacksonville. So we send resources to those areas. And because it works so well, when Florence was coming in, through our region, so in Florida there are 7 regions through the state. Our region with Lee County and our team, we did a strike team of ambulances up to North Carolina. They're still operating there today. We just switched out the teams. So that program works excellent. And building those partnerships is really what it takes to get there.
Well, isn't it awesome? Terry mentioned it, it was explained TIFMAS, which if any of our viewers are, have any questions, contact Terry. He can point you in the right direction for questions about that, how that runs with the state. But how far we've come, it's kind of amazing. I was sitting there. We all remember. We just recognize and remember the 17th anniversary of September 11th, the September 11th. And I remember looking at one of my bosses after the plane hit the Pentagon. We were having a staff meeting. And I said, "We're under attack," and he kind of smiled at me. Yeah. And I'm like, "No, I don't." It was kind of like, we're not. And so many people took that for granted. And then when we tried to implement, Lee, I'm going to throw this at you. When it comes to we're just talking about preparing for, and what it takes as a team and to get people involved and not be those silos, like you said, to do the exercises. I remember us, Terry, we're trying to do an exercise with our city staff, and it was like I'll just say it was like a freaking joke. It was now, God bless, I had great bosses in the way of Claude King and Donna Barron, who's now Terry's city manager. She promoted up, and Steve Backus, assistant city manager, that they actually told people at the beginning, you will take this serious. And the one thing you don't want to do is go against the boss. He was an incredible boss to work for, but when he said something, he meant it. But it was like, Leo, try to get people like you and I are talking about with the Minneapolis thing, like that's really going to happen. Getting people to take a serious look at, you mentioned NIMS, how many people take their online exams by just copying, and then they get into the classroom, or they get up and they're like, well, I'm just from Public Works. Hey, you fire guys, you do this all the time. All I did was take the test. Lee, how have you overcome with what you do now? Some of those that don't take the planning and the exercises that are necessary to walk, it's never really a real thing, but oh my God, you've got to do the exercises to go through to test the system. How do you overcome some of that? You're just blown out of, maybe it's easier in Florida because you guys get whammed with hurricanes, but you know what I'm saying? You get people that think this is a joke or whatever. And that's what we went through, is get people to take it serious. How do you get past that?
Well, when I started in 96, doing exercises, the mentality that you're talking about was exactly what we saw. We've done over 350 exercises now. And we see that since 9/11 in NIMS that we have a greater buy-in, and the most critical component that we have is in developing an exercise is getting the right key players to the table to just start talking about the exercising, to designing an exercise that is realistic for them, pushing them to the edge, the resources within the community, testing those capabilities. So since 96 to today, I've seen a world of difference in exercises. If you can get the right people to the table to be on the exercise planning team, then you can get that buy-in. It still depends on that executive, though. If that executive doesn't have buy-in, they're not going to provide the resources. The Homeland Security grant program has been a big help to us, having that funding available to be able to backfill personnel and to really be able to develop exercises that are meaningful to the community. But it's hit and miss. We still have the problem in some communities that it's just, let's check a box. And it disgusts me as a taxpayer to see the funding available and somebody just take that check in the box mentality. Let's get it done, get it over with, and we've done our exercise. So really doing it in a learning environment is also very important when you're working with the folks, is to help them to understand that we are here to evaluate. We have evaluators. We're looking for strengths. We're looking for areas of improvement, but we're going to help you be better prepared by the end of the day. And sometimes the community and agencies have a fear of what an exercise is going to uncover. Yeah. And setting that trust up front with the planning team and the players that we're here to evaluate, but we're also here to help you to be better prepared at the end of the day. And that's the whole mission of doing an exercise, is to evaluate our policies, plans, procedure, evaluate the training and equipment, and then be better prepared and do a plan, do, check, act is what we look at. Is first, you got to have that plan. You got to make sure everybody's trained on it, have the proper equipment, and then go through through, do the exercise, and then you've got a responsibility to have a corrective action program at the end. And when people see that that's serious, then they take it more closely at heart.
Don't you think in the plans? Because I've been a part of both, but I always think that there's a huge risk when people set up these plans, because sometimes, and I've been part of these drills where you walk in and it's like there's a plane full of children that's hauling nuclear material that crashed into a football stadium, and it's, and it's so overwhelming, it's so complicated, but you walk away or leave the exercise and you feel like you're defeated, because it feels like no matter what kind of preparation you had, there's no way you're going to win in this situation. Whereas I've been part of exercises too that, they're building blocks as far as I'm concerned. And you set people at the table, talk about a hurricane, you come in or somebody's trying to tabletop this, but make it successful and then build on it from there. There's certainly complexities you can add to it later, but I think that's an issue where in some communities you shoot yourself in the foot because it's so over the top, and you lose a lot of buy-in. You think that's a reality.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. That is one of the things. The reason we have discussion-based exercises and operation-based exercises is to make sure that we are going through that building block approach. Sorry I cut you off, Rich.
Well, I was going to say, Rich, you taught with us with John Selk and I for years with the Firefighter Safety Support program. You taught Saving Our Own with me, and we used to talk about this. If you remember what Terry just said, I think is so key about kind of building blocks. You and I remember the first RIT drills we did at Daring Woodridge was nothing more than 150-foot inch and 3/4 line out on the apparatus floor with a 90-degree turn with a firefighter laying 5 feet off it. Where you've seen, Rich, people that come back from a class and they build, like I used to talk about the torture chambers and guys left, like Terry said, left defeated. You didn't even give them a chance to kind of build. They left there going, I just got my ass kicked. I don't want to do this anymore. So the building blocks are huge. You mentioned something before about us, how everybody's working together, sending a, task force, and strike teams and all this, up to North Carolina. The pictures on social media are phenomenal. When you see all the different, I love the fact that people are posting, hey, we're here helping out. We're here helping out. We're here, because it's sending a message to everybody, about what it takes. I had a question for you. You were going to jump in. I didn't interrupt you, but I want to mention that about the complexity of the drills. But go ahead. You were going to jump in there with something, Rich.
Yeah, you're right on, Rick. It goes to two things. Lee said, and you mentioned earlier, strong leader of the organization. So, the city manager, the county administrator saying this is a priority changes the focus for other departments. When you look at fire and law, we respond all the time. And when the big events happen, they look to us. And so we have the opportunity to be a leader in that process. And to Terry, to your point and what Lee was saying, you crawl, walk, run. If I have a public works director and I'm trying to teach him of how important his role is post-disaster, I can't throw him, a whole bunch of stuff that he can't figure out or work through or with his team. So you got to build them up to be successful. And as that, they have what I like to call the aha moments, and that's what we push for. They're, and if we do it this way, then we can do all these other things. Bingo. And then once they get there, they're on your team, and they will produce plans and work through issues with you through anything. It's all about relationship building long before the storm comes, and making them feel successful as part of that program. Lee's really good at doing that in his exercises. It's about making people walk away going, okay, I got something, I understand, I need to go back and change these plans to be more effective.
Well, Rich, you deal with it a much more global, if you will, being the the emergency services director for Sarasota County. You know what I'm saying. Talk real quick before we move on down the road here with things. What do you do from your end to get the buy-in from local communities, other people, the folks around you? We just talked about it. I guess what's the sales pitch? I know it's easy sometimes with some of the mayors to say, look, if you don't play along with this, you're not going to get money from the feds because all this is kind of attached. All the strings are attached, and a lot of people, that was an aha moment for a lot, was like, oh, you mean if I don't do this with FEMA and the rest of the stuff, when it comes to reimbursements, what do you do, to walk? I mean, do you just bring up past events, or what do you do to sell it?
Constant communication, what's going on, from a county perspective, working with the municipalities, communicating with what's happening, getting their discussion in the planning process. As Lee said, the planning process should include the whole community. It's not just the county, it's the city partners. I can talk about our after action from Irma. It's foundations and nonprofits. It's across the community, all the way down to the citizens, because if the citizens aren't prepared, then you're never going to be resilient after the disaster. And so we do a lot of communication. We have an executive policy group that we use during a declaration or a state of emergency, but we have regular communication through what we call city leader conference call, and we talk with all the city managers, and everybody's on the same page when we make decisions. When we do things like close schools, that's done in concert with everybody. We try to do it regionally, so we're coordinating with our neighboring counties. So that way it's a consistent voice to the citizens, what they're hearing across the entire continuum, whether it's a city or a county. And as we learned from Irma, we're trying to increase that. We're trying to put messaging out there and change some of the way we do business. It's a little bit harder for government, but it causes citizens to take action, which is really the most important thing. As the storm is approaching, as we saw in Florence, people need to evacuate, and you can't force them out. You've got to get them to take action, and how you do that is all in your planning and communication.
And so many people don't realize the stresses they place on emergency responders when you decide to stay back. We've seen that, Terry, you and I, down along the Gulf Coast of Texas, where people chose to stay, and it's like, okay, now we got to go take care of that instead of taking care of this. I was amazed when we had Harvey in Texas with the water. People are like, oh, look, they're people are throwing out. This was the catch, that people are throwing out perfectly good furniture and all this. I'm like, just think for a second, 250 miles of shoreline, and then 40 to 60 miles inward, or whatever it was, all that water, everything floating in there, every dumpster, every piece of dog, it's like this cesspool of ick that is floating around everywhere, for the most part. This is not like, Rich, we're up in Chicago and flooded, we pump out our basement. You know what I'm saying? It's incredible, the process that goes into it. So let's throw this at you. Terry and I talked about, Rich, you had some great points to make, and throw this to you and Lee. How does and again, there's a lot of viewers that watch this that, can apply a lot of what you're talking about to whatever it is in their jurisdiction. They may not get the hurricane, but they may get wildland. They may not get the wildland, but they may get the tornadoes. They may, everybody has the ability to face, and we could go on with all the examples of disaster. One of the questions we talked about, Rich, you brought up, was how your city and/or county emergency management plan impacts fire department operations. How do you mesh that, and how do you make that all work?
So one of the things we did in Sarasota, and we continue to learn, we learned a lot of stuff from Irma, but one of the things that we do across all of our departments is what's called a disaster preparedness plan. So department disaster preparedness plan. The great thing about hurricanes is you have, days. It's coming.
No surprise.
The cone of uncertainty may change, but if you're in it, you better be ready. And so all of our departments have plans that start at 140 hours pre-landfall and go down every 24 hours to 0 hour. And there are things that they have to do to prepare their department. So for the fire department, are all your it's hurricane and you're in a hurricane zone. Are all your stations equipped to handle whatever category storm is coming at you, knowing that the storm may intensify or de-intensify as it's approaching shoreline? So maybe you need to close some stations and move people around to get them into a safer place. Feeding, do they have the food there? Do they have the equipment they need? When is the decision made? For us, it's at 45 miles an hour. We stop emergency operations. How do you do that across the county? Do you do it, for us, we do it, especially after Irma, regionally. So if the South County is getting those winds, they may shut down before Mid or North County. All of those things are in that disaster preparedness plan all the way down to 0 hour. And then we go post 12, 24, and 48 hours on initial actions after. So some of the things that you need to do, what happens after the storm is over. We have what's called, once again, from relationship building, TFIT teams, tactical first in teams. That is groups together, law, fire, public works, utilities, and our FP&L, which is our electric utility. They go out to open the main roads from the interstate throughout the county so that we can get resources in to help. So all of those things are parts and pieces that each department has, and all of the department directors have to report back in conference meetings on how they're doing. So if somebody needs help, fire department needs help getting board up for their station, utilities or public works or general services can come help them, and that's where we work together as one team.
Well, and again, I think some of that, when you can walk into a local community and so many places, I know in Texas, when it comes to emergency management plans, being able to walk into some of the small communities that may not have the experienced emergency management planner to be able to say, here, we've got a plan. All you have to do is tweak it to make it work for you. We want to help you. We want to help you do better when this happens. So please take what we've already done and change it around and manipulate it how you can to make it work for you. Lee, talk about you've been down there for your career, if you in dealing with all the things and more that Rich talked about, the relationships between, you see it now, especially with your business with leading the exercises, Lee, the relationships between departments preparing for disasters. What are the things you consider pre, during, post a disaster when you're meeting with these particular agencies that you're training?
One of the key things is relationships, building those relationships beforehand and communicating often. That is a philosophy in Florida that I think we've gotten pretty well. Not only communicating internally within the city and county government, but we also communicate on a regional basis, and then we also have conference calls with the state. So it's very important that you build those relationships, build those trust and bond, work and train together ahead of time, and communicate often. It's been our saving grace in Florida to really be able to do it. Having the right person in the position and following unified command. I was thinking just a few minutes ago when you were talking is pride. Pride and ego is something that's strong, live, and well in the fire service. But it's so important that we look at pride and unified command. We keep our pride with our organization, our jurisdiction, but also that unified command is so important. We've seen time and again, if we don't practice good unified command, a person's a micromanager, that it's not going to have a good outcome, and they're probably going to have a career change in the near future. And unfortunately, we saw a few of those after Hurricane Irma here in Florida.
Well, Lee, has anybody ever come back to you? I'm sure they have. After you've led them in an exercise, whether it was 2 days later or 2 years or 5 years later, have said, holy crap, everything we went through, you know what I'm saying? I know when we do tactics and strategy simulations, how many people come back and go, I just had that particular incident or that fire. How many times, without naming names of certain cities, how many times people have come back and said, holy crap, what you put us through, we lived it real life.
Very often. And I'll share Rich since he's on the line. We did an exercise for the World Rowing Championship that took place in Sarasota County. And 4 of the 5 events that we used in the exercise in prepping everyone for that very large scale event came to fruition in the days that we were activated for it. So that's very common. We have something funny. I teach at the National Emergency Training Center at Emmitsburg, Maryland for the Emergency Management Institute. They have a program where we either bring a community up to the simulation center at Emmitsburg, or we bring a cadre of professionals to their community. It's called the Integrated Emergency Management course. And we have what's called the Flumen effect. Al Flumen was the creator of the program, and remarkably, within a year after doing one, most of those communities communicate back to us and say, wow, if we hadn't have gone through the integrated emergency management course, with our whole community, we wouldn't be prepared for what just hit us. So it comes around and bites us quite frequently. So good exercising, good training, good planning, it makes us successful in what we do.
Well, and not everybody has that. Terry, you've got the cooperation. You've got Donna Barron, who's the city manager there, who probably the best boss I've ever worked for in the way of, you know what, all you got to do is come in, and she's the kind of boss that I used to say that I got excited to see because I couldn't wait to tell her everything we're doing there in Lewisville. You've got the support with your bosses that's why Lewisville's been instrumental, you know, with being part of TIFMAS, because you'll send people anywhere. If anybody calls Lewisville, they'll just pick up, you know, it's not about having to be everywhere and look at what we're doing. It's about they genuinely want to make a difference. You've got some great leadership, Terry, in Lewisville that, you know, I talked about Claude, you know, before he retired as city manager and Donna moved up, to have that support to be able to pick up and send teams. You just sent them to California for Wildland. You know, when they start flying Rich and Lee, the C-130s back from here, when you get hurricanes coming towards Houston, we're hundreds of ambulances in the rigs, and we're flying this. We're 5 hours from Houston, and we're loading up our shelters, and the C-130s are flying nursing home patients back ahead of time and all that. Terry, you've got some great support there when it comes to making that all happen.
Yeah, and you know, sitting here listening, and it shouldn't come as a huge surprise to anyone, but you know, the practice makes perfect, and the preparedness that goes along with this. And honestly, if you think back, you know, every one of us can remember being in elementary school and doing fire drills, and you know, you do them, and as a kid, you don't understand necessarily the logic behind it, but it works. And so if you know, the people along the way and the people that don't have buy-in, or the people that feel like the drill is not necessary and what's the chances and what's the odds and all those sort of things, you know, I think you can look at the aviation industry and commercial aviation when a plane, you know, has some, you know, unfortunate event, and you're able to evacuate 250 people out of an aircraft in less than, you know, 90 seconds or, you know, whatever the benchmarks are. But not only does it happen, it happens almost consistently 100% of the time with little to no issues. The preparedness, the drills, the practice, the reaffirmation that goes along with just the repetition over and over and over again, right? So we can look at every football team, we can look at every baseball team. You know, does Derek Jeter need to go to spring training? But you go and you do repetition, muscle memory. And so across the board, whether it's professional sports, whether it's this profession, whether it's the hospital, you know, the hospital runs various drills in various places. And so on a large scale, a small scale, it works. And so, you know, in this particular community, we are fortunate because from top to bottom in this organization, we're doing the preliminary plans right now for a major scale EOC exercise in 2019. The funding's been identified. The EOC team is in the process of developing the scenario and the plan now, and it's a full scale. I mean, it's a full meal deal. There's a lot that goes into this, and we as leaders or people that are responsible in these organizations, we damn sure better take it seriously, because whatever it is, whatever the drill is that we're going to go over, that's going to apply to every single thing we do, whether that's a major accident on the highway that involves 3 or 4 units. There's components of that work all along the way. And that's why inherently I think the fire service is pretty good at this, because we do it on small scales, big scales, and it translates. So, but you know, a buy-in from the entire community, and absolutely that's got to start from the leadership, whether that's, you know, starting with the governor of the state and working its way down. But it's absolutely every step of the way, everyone has to understand the purpose and the reason behind it.
And sadly, T, not everybody's got that, you know, that support, like you said. Rich and Lee, I want to throw something at you. Someone just asked me on on Twitter, a direct message kind of thing, and we were talking about EOCs and things as well, and you know, part of, you know, let's get all our folks together so we can run this. You know, I know a lot of people are talking about it, and I saw a lot of benefit to it, especially maybe when you're doing a soft opening of your EOC or a hard opening, is Are you seeing some of the virtual EOCs or parts where, you know, I know in some areas it's hard to grab, you know, you're taking everybody from City Hall, bring them together, but all their stuff's back there, or they have to access and they're not, you know, I mean, no one's ever, I know I'm not comfortable if I sit down just with my laptop. Are you seeing, whether, you know, I'll throw this to maybe Lee first or Rich, are you seeing more of that where some of the smaller entities that may not have the big grandeur EOC, sometimes it's better if they can do a virtual where people can, you know, I know that's all here we're talking, what if you lose power and all that? You know what I'm saying? Are you seeing some of that where maybe someone in finance, you know, they may have someone still, they'll have someone still in the EOC, the big EOC, but they're working back with their folks back at City Hall or a county building. You know, you know I'm going with the virtual. That was the question, was virtual EOCs or components.
Yes, we're seeing this quite a bit, and I know Collins can speak about it, but the department operations centers are really underutilized, the docks, and having an EOC, but the department still needs to have its ability to manage its assets, its resources, and the utilization of a dock and working virtually is becoming a norm instead of something that is unfamiliar. So I like the fact that people are looking at the reality of their allocation of their resources, their human resources, and what they can do. And we can do more now with technology. It's the key leadership we need to be there in the EOC to handle those critical high-level decisions. And then our department operations centers working with their assets and resources can manage those without elevating. Rich, you want to address how y'all handle that?
Yeah, that's a great point, Lee. We use department operating centers. So if you think of the EOC, whether it's in your city or county, as the high-level strategic decision-making, you know, this is the command unit on the scene. You know, when the big fire is happening and we close the windows and we're dealing with the issues, getting a big picture, think big, as you say, Rick. You want the leadership there for that, but the actual tactical, you know, how many fire engines do we need? Where are the issues? That stuff should flow into the EOC as the big picture. And so using the department operating centers really allows the tactical planning to occur for the support that's needed out in the field. And we use that a lot. The other thing we do a lot of is a joint information system instead of a joint information center. We work virtually on joint information across all of the entities in the county throughout the incident. Obviously, as you said, Rick, you know, when the power's out and all the other bad things happen, that changes the game a little bit. But for the most part, all of our departments, out of 17 departments, we have, I want to say 8 or 9 department operating centers that are the specific planning and tactical unit leadership within each department.
Oh, that's awesome. I just, one of my buddies, Marcus Kettner, talked about, he mentioned, he just shot me a message saying, can't say enough about the drills. And Lee, you'll like this, the tabletop drills and the drills. He said our city trained on their creek flooding. 6 months later, a whole different part of the town flash flooded in a storm. Activated, you'll see the mayor, which is what you want. The mayor was thrilled that everything went. There's no such thing as the perfect. I always use that, but that the drills actually, like you said before, Lee, all of a sudden now, holy cow, we went through what you trained us in. Go ahead, buddy. Go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, one thing, talking about the virtual, for it to be successful with the communities that we've worked with, you've got to drill, you've got to have IT engaged in it, you've got to work out the kinks and the bugs, and you have to have a backup plan when the technology, if the technology fails, for it to be successful. But they're a beautiful thing. It allows you to maximize your resources. If you're going virtual, and especially a small community where they're limited in assets. So it is very beneficial, but the key is to get the bugs worked out early and to exercise being virtual. It's a different environment when you're working virtual than when you're face-to-face.
Absolutely. And Terry, you know, one of the things I want to mention as well with, you know, we just talk about virtual versus face-to-face and having that, how you can link them together, but you have to have those people there. Another question that popped up from somebody was there was a lot of media given towards I think it was Houston on a lot of their apparatus and not being designed for high water. You know, the high, and Terry, you saw that going on in that part. And I think San Antonio, they get their flash floods. I think if I remember right, T, they're kind of on their game. They're you know, they spec a lot of their rigs, especially those areas, to be, you know, spec as high water rigs. I don't know if Terry, when you want to jump on that, or if Rich and Lee, how, I mean, obviously in Florida, there's got to be a lot of cities that are specing their rigs. I know they're doing it down, you know, the Gulf Coast here, for high water, getting, you know, everything up higher in the rig so you can respond a little bit better. And I'll throw it out to all three of you. I mean, that was something someone brought up on Twitter, high water rigs. And not like, we're not talking ducks and we're not talking tank, you know, military. We're talking specifying your apparatus, your fire apparatus, you know, with the high water specs. I don't know, Rich or Lee, you want to jump on there, Terry?
From Sarasota perspective, we have some stations that are out on the east side of the county near the Mayaca River, where we have flooding. So those are specialized rigs that are higher. And it's a constant, you know, where for us looking where those issues might be. And we have some other rigs as well. I think the issue is planning ahead of time. And once again, on the other side of that, it's getting people to take action. If our citizens do not understand when we say evacuate, that it's a life and death situation, and yet we see it. I mean, we're seeing it this week in Florence. We saw it in Harvey. People don't want to leave their home, and then our teams are left to try to go in after the fact and get them out of there. It really is about preparedness on the education side for citizens as well.
And having somebody do a good job specing your rigs for you, like Terry's got there. Go ahead, Terry.
Well, you know, to touch on kind of what we've been talking about for the last 50 minutes, but you know, the cooperation. So in the city of Lewisville, and if we had to instantly come up with a plan to say that, you know, we've got to operate in an environment that maybe our engines are not going to perform at their best, but I can assure you, I can call over to Public Services and I can have a fleet of dump trucks. And with zero pushback, with zero anything. And not only that, well, but they will tell us, do you need operators, or what else do you need? Or, you know, and so, and I think getting back to the preparation, getting back to the buy-in, getting back to the fact that this is not a fire department problem. It's not an emergency services problem. It's a community problem. Thus, it is your entire, wealth of services that you're offering to people each and every day. So, you know, in Houston, I know, talking to Chief White, they ran into some of these kind of issues. And so they are identifying particular areas that they're going to spec equipment that will operate in a high water environment better. But everyone or anyone who's involved in city government knows it's not going to happen overnight. You know, to roll out a fleet of 20 of those kind of specialty vehicles in the Houston Fire Department is going to take years. And so in the meantime, how you can do a large part to solve that problem today, but that takes relationships, it takes communication, and it takes those plans and the ability to sit down and work all this out ahead of time. And you know, that's how I think the easiest way to address it.
Terry, I absolutely agree with you. You know, about a week before Irma, 2 weeks, we had a 500-year rain event in the north end of our county, and we had flooding in some of the estuaries that go into Sarasota Bay. Got a call from the city at about 6 o'clock at night. By 7 o'clock, we had boats from mosquito control, as well as Parks and Rec and some of our public works teams, and we were moving people out of the area without any issue. I mean, it was seamless because we were able to make those calls and connections immediately based on the relationships in our planning.
Well, and here, let me throw this out there to you. I guess I always talk about Terry and I because we worked together so long, and I know absolutely that his boss, Donna Barra, the city manager there, is all about taking care of their employees. I mean, her and Melinda Galler, well, the assistant city manager, is our HR director for a long time, and was the dream HR director. I saw her literally in tears when one of our council members was screwing with the insurance, or potentially screw with the insurance plan, the program for employees. They take care of their employees. They come number one. Rich and Lee, and this is something Terry and I talked about before. What do you have set up? What do you recommend? And I know I mentioned Palm Beach County for the longest time had a great policy when it came to what do you do prior to. in your policies for your first responders? Because that was a big issue in a lot of places all over the country, whether it was flooding in towns, flash flooding, where people were, even some people were like, yeah, you could go, and then later on they got dinged for leaving their post. What are you guys doing in Florida that a lot of other states can model after to take care of your first responders before it hits?
Well, a couple of things. Personal preparedness is going to be very critical to your success in any disaster. We know that ready.gov has Make a Plan. In the state of Florida, we have Florida Disaster .org has Get a Plan, and it's a program to help you to create a plan for your family, for your pets, to deal with those. It's sad to say that many people don't take advantage of those free services that are readily available on those two different sites that they can develop it. But the critical component is an annual reminder. We have newbies that have never gone through a disaster. Some of us have that life experience. Sharing with them what it's like to be in public safety, in the fire service, and the expectations that are upon us to be able to respond and to take care of our communities. And to do that, we have to take care of our families, ourselves first, to make sure that we're prepared and ready. One of the things that we heard across Florida that was disturbing, but it was a reality, was that staff didn't have time to get prepared. And when they were given that time, it was a little bit too late. Resources were already gone off the shelves. And so we've got to do an earlier rotation on staff that are in public safety and basically all essential personnel in city, county government to see that they get ready and they're prepared for being able to serve the community. So if they get their ducks in a row ahead of time, then they're readily there for us.
And Rich?
Rick, that was a huge issue for us as when once Irma was over, we had enacted all of our major plans for sheltering. We sheltered over 20,000 citizens. We activated all of our special needs or medically dependent and moved them into shelters. And so when we looked back and went through it on a deep dive, we identified several things. One, you got to close government early. If you're in the cone of uncertainty and it's coming at you, at 72 hours out before a storm's coming in, everything needs to be shut down. And then that way you can transition over to emergency operations. And in the case of Florida, in most all of our counties, all the county employees are considered essential because we're it. You got to open up shelters, you got to do all those things. So everybody has a role. You've got to give them time to get their houses ready and get set. We had our Harvey just before it. People were afraid. We had people that left the area. They didn't have plans. So we've done a number of things. One, better communication within the fire department. You got 28 stations. Making sure that the information is getting out to every employee on what's going on is huge. That takes away the unknown and that makes it less fearful. Two, you identify places. If you got guys working and the family has nowhere to go, identify a shelter that you can get them in and put families together so that way they're together and feel safe. Three, making sure that once the storm is over, if somebody has damage to their home or people are injured, you got to get them out of there and get them back to where they need to go and take care of their family and understand that that's going to happen. All of those things are really important. The other thing we noticed was, daycare. Once the schools close, we have employees that have kids that are in school and they have to work. There's nowhere for them to go. And we've been very fortunate to work with both our libraries and our public our Parks and Rec team, and we have identified daycare and open up daycare centers as soon as the schools close. People can register. We can handle up to 300 children between the ages of 5 and 13, and so that way the parents can drop them off and continue to go to work, take care of stuff. And we even have that daycare available at shelters, so that if somebody needs to work in a shelter, their kid's safe while they're working. So, those are some big lessons that we learned that I think help prepare your. It gets the employees to say, "I'm here to help," and they're taking care of me along the way.
And that's absolutely huge. Like I said, so many times you read about it, and we forget sometimes about the first responders. Those that are out there doing it. A lot of those have lost. They live in those affected areas as well. Most of them, and we have to think about them. Great message. Throw this to Lee first, and then Rich. Terry and I guys are very big on lessons learned. We're always, what advice would you give to a chief? What advice would you give to a company officer when it comes to those kinds of things? Lessons learned from, and we're getting close to finishing out here. We're going to go a few minutes longer. If you could pick a couple key lessons learned from Irma, is there anything that comes to the top of your head that you could share with the viewers? That would be a couple of the biggies. Maybe start with Lee first. Some lessons learned from Irma.
Having the right people in the right positions, and those individuals understanding their policies, plans, and procedures. It's so critical. Not wait until the last minute and start flipping a plan and looking at it. You've got to, if you're in those key positions, you've got to have an understanding of your policy, plans, and procedures and where your agency fits in with the community. And then that right person in the command level positions. You've got to have those. And one of the things my grandma always said, don't put all your eggs in one basket. We saw that happening across Florida, where the A team, the Alpha team, has all the people with the life experience, the training, the history, and then the Bravo team is left with folks that don't have all that. And you've got to blend the Alpha Bravo team where you have that life experience, that history, and that education blended on both of those shifts, and not just heavy on the A team. B team's got to have it too.
And that's so huge. Knowing the plan, knowing your plan and how it works. You would think that's a duh moment, but you're right. Knowing your plan. And then you mentioned something huge. Knowing where your agency fits. Where do I fit? If something happens, I think most, selfishly on the firefighter side, I can say for law enforcement as well, most firefighters and police officers, first responders, they want to be led. They want to plan. The majority I've met, they want SOPs, SOGs. They want, if they're on the labor side, labor contract. The volunteers want their charters. People want, tell me what I'm supposed to do, and then let me go do what I'm supposed to do. But you got to take the effort to know that stuff too. So Lee, that was a great point. Great point. Rich, lessons learned.
We hit the first one. Making sure you got plans or how to take care of your employees. I think that's huge, and making sure that they're ready. So that's number one. Number two is removing the barriers for citizens to take action. It may be harder for government, but if it causes somebody to leave, that's better. So, for example, we open all our shelters at the same time. Around the state, a lot of them open up in tiers. As one fills, they'll open up the next one. And people wait for the school by them to open up. And so all of our messaging and everything we do now is about how do we get citizens to take action. So really take a look at those plans, because that's going to make your life easier with the cascading effects like you see with Florence, the flooding and the things after the fact. If that's done up front, it's going to be easier for you downstream. No pun intended.
Well, and Terry, you guys are awesome. Louisville, I'll teach a class, and especially if it's a big class, especially the company officer academies or chief officer academies. And I always, sometimes I used to send, I stopped doing, I used to send Terry messages going, get ready for the emails of guys asking, he's already laughing, of guys asking for copies of their SOPs and SOGs, because I brag on them because they're some of the best. Rich and Lee, before we close things out here, resources that are available. You guys have mentioned a couple things already, but let me cut to the chase on this one. If somebody wanted a copy, I'll throw this at you, Rich, because I know there's been a couple of counties I used to get stuff from down there. If somebody says, look, Rich, I need something. Are you guys willing to share, your SOGs on response, or what are you willing to share with those that may need something, some building blocks, if you will, so not reinventing the same wheel?
Never recreate the wheel. All they got to do is email me, rcollins@scgov.net, and we'll provide whatever we can. Department disaster preparedness plans, SOGs, and how we operate as a storm approaches. Lessons that we've learned. I'd be glad to share anything we have with anybody to help them.
And that is, I can't tell how many people have borrowed and taken stuff from Terry for what he's got there, Louisville, Chief Tittle. And again, why reinvent the wheel? Just, I think that's awesome, Rich. You guys do that. Lee, any resources you can think of that we throw out there to some of our viewers?
FEMA has a wealth of information. A lot of times People don't look there, but there is a wealth of information on the FEMA website for preparedness, planning, response, recovery. And I was just going through one of the independent study courses last night and was laying across the bed talking to my wife while I went through it and just new things. It was just going back through one of the courses updated and just looking at new stuff and things that are out there. We get complacent sometimes, and as old dogs, we don't try to learn new tricks, and you've got to stay up current, and everybody's putting things out there. And if I don't know it or have it, I know where I can find it. So L Newsome, Newsome at ERECINC.com. Send me a note. I know many emergency managers here in Florida as well as abroad and can usually find what you're looking for.
Outstanding. Terry, any closing thoughts? That's awesome.
No, I think that, we've talked a lot about obviously preparedness, and, I can't emphasize enough that, that there's a method to the madness. And if it's certainly important enough, we go out and practice the stretching lines and working mega codes and EMS and now we do a tremendous amount of focus on active shooter. Every community around us is, and it's hot, and some days it's cold, and some days it's just you're tired of dragging mannequins and people down hallways and loading them in ammo, and I get it. But you know what? First and foremost, I say I hope that there's never a hurricane that comes back through Florida, but I think that's a pipe dream, and I hope that no one ever has to utilize the skills of active shooter, response. But that's a pipe dream also. So, stay focused and keep fighting the fight. If you're fighting and battling, getting people to buy in on this and supporting this, keep fighting that fight.
Well, and we've come a long way. We've come a long way from, I just met with Rich, I'm a big hazmat geek, and I got to do a keynote and a presentation for the Pennsylvania Hazardous Materials Technicians Conference, another great group. And we've come so far from, we used to make fun of the civil defense people. Then later on it became ESDA people. We made fun of them. And we kind of teased that if you're emergency management, we called you the what if people. And then everything led up to, in the events afterwards of 9/11 and Katrina, all of a sudden we've all realized that it's incredibly important to be serious about our disaster response, our disaster preparation, being ready ahead of time and having all the key players in there getting along like we've been talking about. I wish we had 3 hours. We had just an hour to cover this stuff, and it was some great information. We get some great comments saying thank you. For those that may have joined late, if you saw, I know we've been posting all over. We met with Rich Collins, our good friend Rich, Emergency Services Director from Sarasota County, Florida. Rich and I go way back on the south side of Chicago. And Rich, I love you. Lee Newsome, retired Battalion Chief from Ocala Fire Rescue in Florida. One more time, Lee, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, whether it's for the information that you said that they may need, or to have you come out, maybe they want to hire you to bring you out and say, hey, look, we need you to run it. We need someone to come out and run us through one of these exercises. Throw your email one more time out there for them.
L Newsome, Newsome at ERECINC.com.
Outstanding. Rich, one more time, your email address, brother.
Sure. R Collins, COLLINS at scgov.net.
Well, and like I said, Terry and I were pretty excited about having you guys come on board, and the timing couldn't have been more perfect, Lee and Rich. For we want to keep those on the Upper East Coast in our thoughts and prayers, just like we do when something hits down there anywhere else. They're going through some hard times still. You guys know their pain, and I'll just say it, I'm extremely proud of what I'm watching go on. South, especially North Carolina, Virginia. They're that, and the efforts of the first responders for all the country that responded there is just incredible. If you're watching this, if you watch this later on, obviously we're so proud of you. Thank you for what you do. But Lee and Rich, thank you very much for what you do, not only for just joining Terry and I, but for what you do every day for the lives of so many. You guys are having an impact. I don't think you two will ever know just how wide, how far-reaching the impact is that you guys have. But thank you, Lee. Thank you, Rich, so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Honor to be here, Rick, anytime. And prayers and thoughts for all of our first responders that are out there and care.
Outstanding. And hey, we're all on Facebook and Twitter. Just give us a shout. You get a hold of us anytime. Terry, our next show is October 17th. I believe that's also anniversary of 23rd Street Fire in New York City. We'll be talking about that. Terry and I are here with you every third Wednesday when something doesn't pop up or one of us is gone. You can see some great shows here at fireengineering.com and for the Humpday Hangouts on Wednesdays, 12 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Eastern, with some great people. In closing, Terry and I never leave the show without asking you to please keep the men and women in armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. And remember, never forgetting means never forgetting. Be safe and God bless you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, guys.